Chapter 58. In the Pantry. About a half hour later, we had gone through about a quarter of the boxes. If you're wondering what I was thinking, I wasn't. I was trying very hard not to think. So far, the closest thing I had found to a can of peas was an old vinyl record album by a band called Can Heat. Tony had temporarily given up on the boxes and was checking the refrigerator. "You don't refrigerate a can of peas," I pointed out. "No, you stick it in a box and hide it in the garage," she replied. "Just what are we supposed to do with this can of peas anyway?" I had no clue. Use it to smash a window so we can get inside the damn house? I guess I assumed it all would explain itself when we found the peas. Actually, I was beginning to doubt I'd heard Trap correctly, but I didn't dare say that to Tony. "Eureka!" she suddenly shouted. I turned. In her hand, she held not a can of peas, but a key. "It was in the bike pouch," she said proudly. I followed her to the rear of the garage. "You do it," she said, and handed the key to me. It took a little jiggling, but I managed to insert the key into the lock. I tried turning it. At first it seemed stuck, but then the lock gave way and the door opened. Tony held onto my forearm, in the same way Trap used to, and we stepped inside. We entered the laundry room, took a brief look around, then continued on to the kitchen, which was the more logical place to find peas. Not that logic was playing too big a role in any of this. Pots and pans of all sizes hung from an iron rack. Knives stuck out of a butcher block table. We tried various cabinets and found dishes, glasses, and a bunch of coffee mugs that Trap had evidently won at bridge tournaments. I opened a door and found a walk-in pantry filled with shelves of canned food. "Eureka!" I said. There were cans of tomato sauce, cans of fruit, cans of soup, but no peas. My eureka had been premature. "Theodora only wanted him to eat fresh vegetables," said Tony, who joined me in the pantry. She pronounced Theodora's name in the way Theodora said it, Deodaughter. Tony's voice was equally alluring. "Okay, maybe he had a special craving for canned peas," I said. "But he had to keep them hidden from Theodora. So all we have to do is find his secret hiding place, and then—" "Yes?" Tony asked eagerly. I had no idea. Tony smiled at me. "We don't know what the hell we're doing, do we?" she asked. Her eyes were shining. I was reminded of Arnold's description of Annabelle. Her eyes sparkled like diamonds. "Not a clue," I admitted. She didn't seem to mind. For a moment we just stood there, looking into each other's eyes. I took hold of her hands and felt her fingers wrap around mine. I no longer gave a damn about canned peas. I became aware of the sound of birds chirping, quietly at first, then louder, with squawks and calls. "My phone!" Tony exclaimed. She pulled her hands away and fished her phone out of a pocket. The birds had been her ringtone. "Hello?" she said. "Oh, hi. No, Her voice softened as she stepped out of the pantry. "I've been thinking about you, too." I slipped past her and on out of the kitchen to give her privacy. I found myself in the entry hall, at the place where Trap had laid on the floor with the candle burning in his ears, sucking out his earwax. I heard Tony say, "That sounds great!" Then, "No, I better meet you there." She spoke in short bursts. "I'm not at home. I'm at the mall. With my mom. She can take me." She stepped out into the hall. "Let me get a pencil." I went through an archway into an office. The walls were lined with built-in bookshelves that were still crammed with books. There were two desks, an old roll top, and a more modern one with a computer. I opened the roll top, found a pen, and handed it to Tony, who had followed me into the office. She giggled at something Cliff said. I assumed it was Cliff. And then she pantomimed the act of writing. She was asking me for a piece of paper. There was a stack of papers on the computer desk, but I didn't know if they might be important. When I looked at the top page, I was surprised to see my name on it. Tony reached out impatiently. It was the email confirmation of my flight to Chicago. Trap, Theodora's, and Gloria's were also there, as well as all of our hotel reservations. Tony saw the look on my face. With the phone in her ear, she read the emails, then abruptly said, "I gotta go. I'll meet you there in 20 minutes. No, everything's fine. Bye." She hung up. We looked at each other for what seemed like a long time. "That's why he brought me here," I said at last. "And what about the can of peas?" asked Tony. "Who the hell knows?" She thought for a while, then very quietly said, "Okay." "You sure?" I asked. "If you're sure, I'm sure," said Tony. "I'm sure," I said. I wasn't sure at all. I looked back at my plane reservation. I felt a shiver run through me as I spoke my next words. Trap and Annabelle are going to play for the national championship. And this time, they'll win, said Tony. A few minutes later, I was driving her to a bookstore cafe for her rendezvous with Cliff. I agreed to let her off a block away so he wouldn't see my car. I tried not to think back to Tony and me in the pantry and what might have happened if Cliff hadn't called when he did. I just had to push those thoughts out of my mind. We had more important things to focus on, and after all, she was my best friend's girlfriend. It was lucky he called, Tony said quietly, almost as if she'd been reading my mind. Or we might have not found those emails. I didn't respond. I didn't know if Cliff's call had been good luck, bad luck, or synchronicity. I'm sorry, she said. She hesitantly touched my sleeve, then quickly withdrew her hand.